altar of atonement. Nikaya 3 refuges. Buddham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. I take refuge in Buddha. I take refuge in Buddha. I take refuge in Dharma. I take refuge in Dharma. I take refuge in Sangha. I take refuge in Sangha.
The 5 remembrances. I am of the nature to grow old.
There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature of change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My deeds are my closest companions. I am the beneficiary of my deeds. My deeds are the ground on which I stand. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature of change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My deeds are my closest companions. I am the beneficiary of my deeds. My deeds are the ground on which I stand. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature of change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My deeds are my closest companions. I am the beneficiary of my deeds. My deeds are the ground on which I stand. This precious human life, rarely encountered, is easily lost. Now that I have life and opportunity, may I practice the Dharma wholeheartedly.
Mahayana refuge. In my heart, I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
May I liberate suffering beings and bring them to great joy. May the compassionate spirit of love grow within me, that I may actualize the great way. In my heart, I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. May I liberate suffering beings and bring them to great joy. May the compassionate spirit of love grow within me, that I may actualize the great way. In my heart, I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. May I liberate suffering beings and bring them to great joy. May the compassionate spirit of love grow within me, that I may actualize the great way.
Invocation of the lineage. I give thanks for the guidance of my teachers.
For the lineages of teachers before them, I give thanks and offerings for their devoted practice of generosity, moral discipline, patience, joyful effort, concentration, wisdom, skillful means, unshakable vow, spiritual powers, and awakened awareness for my benefit. May their years of life be lengthened. May their vows be completely realized. And may I cultivate these perfections with their guidance.
7 practices of the Bodhisattva. I bow down in body, speech, and mind.
I offer the best I have to give, both real and imagined, to fill the space between us. I regret and purify all transgressions. I rejoice in all virtues. I request you to remain until total enlightenment. I request wise and compassionate guidance. I dedicate my merit for the sake of all beings.
Generating love and compassion. May all sentient beings be free from clinging and hatred.
being close to some and distant from others. How wonderful it would be, may this be accomplished. I will free them from clinging and hatred. Bless me to accomplish this. May all sentient beings enjoy happiness and the causes of happiness. How wonderful it would be, may this be accomplished. I will bring them happiness and the causes of happiness. Bless me to accomplish this. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. How wonderful it would be, may this be accomplished. I will free them from suffering and the causes of suffering. Bless me to accomplish this. May all sentient beings have the joy that is never known suffering. May they be free from clinging, hatred, jealousy, miserliness, doubt, pride, wrong view, ignorance, and dualistic thoughts. How wonderful it would be, may this be accomplished. I will bring them to this state. Bless me to accomplish this.
Please stand for the Heart Sutra, which you will find in the book on page 4. Great Ajna Paramita Heart Sutra. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva practicing deep Ajna Paramita clearly saw that all 5 skandhas are empty, transforming all suffering and distress. Shariputra form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form, form is exactly emptiness, emptiness exactly form, sensation, perception, mental reaction, consciousness are also like this. Shariputra, all things are essentially empty, not formed, not destroyed, not stained, not pure, without loss, without gain. Therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no sensation, perception, mental reaction, consciousness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no color, sound, smell, taste, touch, object of thought,
endless, and so on to no old age and death, and also no ending of old age and death, no suffering, cause of suffering, cessation hath no wisdom and no attainment, since there is nothing to attain. The Bodhisattva lives by Prajnaparamita, with no hindrance in the mind, no hindrance, and therefore no fear, far beyond elusive thinking. Right here is nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future live by Prajnaparamita, attaining Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore know that Prajnaparamita is the great sacred mantra, the great vivid mantra, the unsurpassed mantra, the supreme mantra, which completely removes all suffering. This is truth, not mere formality. Therefore set forth the Prajnaparamita mantra. Set forth this mantra and proclaim Gate, Gate, Para, Gate, Parsam, Gate, Bodhisattva, Gate, Gate, Para, Gate, Parsam, Gate, Bodhisattva, Gate, Gate, Para, Gate, Parsam, Gate, Bodhisattva.
Infinite realms of light and dark convey the Buddha mind. All it is, and we ourselves come forth in perfect harmony. We offer this sincere and devoted practice for the many beings of the 6 worlds, and dedicate it in grateful thanks to the strength and sound practice of the Great Heartland Sangha and its teachers. May our virtuous actions be clear from all interferences, and may our vows be fully realized. We especially dedicate these merits to all those suffering from cruelty, calamity, injustice, and war, to Enme, Monica, David, Zuise, Jimmy, Eugen, Troy, Logan, Michael K., Stephen, Christine, Mary, Hazel, Sokai, Roger, and Debbie. May they heal their ills. And to William, Charlie, Buddy, Joanne, Sandra, Mr. Perkins, and Jane at the time of their deaths, and for those whose names we hold in the silence of our hearts, as well as those whose names we now voice aloud. May we live in perfect peace with Buddha Dharma, and may we realize the Buddha way together. All Buddha,
Thank you, everyone. Do we have Dharma School today? All right, Dharma School participants, can you present out for a class? And the rest of us, please be seated for Zazen. please rise for King Hymn, our meditation. So joining from the center of the zendo, first and third rows will turn to your right, second and fourth to your left. We'll start at a really slow half-step pace, and when you hear the clappers a second time, we'll proceed at a regular pace, following the person in front of you. We will now recite the Song of Covenant, which is in the literature book on page 8. We, the Daishin Kokuji Sangha, with respect for the worth and dignity of each person, with wonder at the wisdom and compassion we seek to cultivate by practice, and with deep gratitude for the teachers of this lineage and our connection to one another, covenant to support each other by upholding the precepts of doing no harm, practicing good, and actualizing good for others. Please take a seat for today's Dharma talk. Sit comfortably so you can see the teachers, and we'll begin with the Gatha on opening the sutra, also on page 8. Gatha on opening the sutra. We are
So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for choosing to be here. Please arrange yourselves so we can see each other if that's helpful. Reverend Kaishan and I will be presenting. Wow, that's amazing. That sunlight is coming like directly. Woo. If anyone could go and shut the blind to the back window, that'd be awesome. I see the light. We don't need a team. One can handle it. You guys can arm wrestle for it. Oh, so on one. Okay, all right. So anyway, Reverend Kaishan and I are going to chat this morning, and this is the first Dharma talk formally of the Jakai retreat, which is coming up, starting for some of us tomorrow, many of us on Tuesday. And as a little bit of contextual framework, I'd like to point to William Shatner, wisdom teacher. Captain Kirk, right? He had the interesting experience in his 90s of being shot up in a tube up into out of orbit. And he had mentioned that he expected to feel a great sense of awe and wonder at the vast cosmos and wanting to explore it, and a great affinity with the final frontier, so-called. And he had a completely different experience. If you haven't heard the tale, I advise you take a look. In his William Shatner kind of way, he expresses the fact that he felt nothing but just a blackness unlike anything he had ever encountered, the great gaping void, I suppose. And upon looking down upon the earth, that's where his gaze couldn't be pulled away from. Home, this planet itself. And this is a very common phenomenon that many, if not all, that have gone into orbit and had the experience physically in their own bodies of looking down and seeing what Carl Sagan termed the pale blue dot, another great wisdom teacher. And this perspective, this shift in perspective from sort of ground level, I was introducing this in the concluding comments to the Jakai witnessing this morning. It's like the border between Ohio and Kentucky, say, between Michigan and Ohio, say. Down here, that seems like a big deal, perhaps. The drivers are like this, the drivers are like that, this is legal, now it's not, now it is, on and on. The great Ohio-Michigan War that some of us may know about. Well, when you zoom out, this becomes like ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Like, are you kidding me? Kind of ridiculous. This capacity to, most of us, many of us will have had the experience of being on top of a high-rise building, and you can see perhaps a familiar cityscape from a higher vantage point, and already it looks different. In Toledo, you can see the cornfields, and you can see the river and the lake, and you can see the suburbs from, Government One Center. Very interesting. Just that much will change your perspective. Down here, this neighborhood, that neighborhood. Well, on a plane, it's different again. Orbit, and then, from the perspective of the Voyager. And this so-called now overview effect, this reshuffling of the deck of assumptions, is a very common experience for the astronauts. Now, most of us, if not all of us, will live without the experience of being jettisoned into the void, literally. We can do it here, though. We can have an encounter with reality without having to defy gravity. We can actually have a very deep experience that doesn't obliterate or change anything that was there before, but rather puts it into a much, much deeper context, a much more integrated view, you see. I mean, those astronauts didn't add anything to reality. They didn't bend the world to make it in their will or anything. They simply saw what was already there, what had been there before they were born, will be there after they've passed. They've lived, loved, laughed, cried on that little speck. But now you can see it. And the result, compassion. Result, seeing into the futility of so much of what we heap upon ourselves in the name of honor or vengeance or resources or rival God concepts or whatever stupid thing. So this is what the Dharma does. I think everybody can relate to the idea. But the experience itself, what does it mean to see into reality deep enough that that overview effect actually occurs? Because it can, and it does. The Buddha, after all, was just another Homo sapien, precisely the same as us, no different. Not some ontologically other entity come visit from afar. Rather a native born, a local, a homie, if you will. Just another Homo sapien here in the same yard. Now, as people, as Homo sapiens, what we tend to do is we seem to notice or create a dichotomy. Or you could say that we have different ways of working with this. The one is an organized, common human kinesthetic language for invoking and expressing and experiencing this reality. Right? An organized, common human kinesthetic language. A thing we do with our bodies together that invokes and affirms and calls to mind reality itself. That's what we all just did. What's happening when we're all standing there, you know? Like, why is that a thing, you know? There are anthropological and historical reasons why it's a thing, but why it's a valuable thing is because it gives us a way of being in community and being connected to each other in expressing this overview effect, this awakening, the Dharma. Now, in contrast to that, there's the individual experience. The subjective, individual, direct, intimate experience of this. And it's many people's reality that they have been engaged in a kind of communal practice that is radically unhealthy, because what it does is create and cause more suffering, more divisions, more stupid lines upon which ridiculous, fruitless battles can be fought. And you do well to extricate yourself from this experience. This is just ridiculous. However, there is a healthy way to be in community and to be connected and to use ritual and liturgy to embody and express and deepen and integrate this deep Buddha view experience. And that's what we do in liturgy. That's what we're doing. The unhealthy version of it is sort of a blind, conformist, just kind of stuff yourself into the box, do what everyone else does, don't ask any questions kind of thing. And that should be rejected. But the healthy version is about community and connection. Which, dear one, you need somehow some way. It's really not sufficient to just be alone in this way. We're community folks. We're unique, but we're not that unique. In the same way, the individual expression, the unhealthy version of it is sort of a self-obsessed, narcissistic, self-oriented, I'm right, everyone else is wrong, no one knows better than me, only I can do this right, kind of hellhole that you create for yourself and smear yourself in the muck with. We become feral, we become disconnected, we become a little crazy. That's the unhealthy version. The healthy version, however, is a direct and intimate experience of reality. There's nothing unhealthy about that. And so in this tradition, as I've encountered it, both of these are absolutely necessary. That's what this path is doing. One must gather in community and learn how to function in community and be part of the group and know how to make the music as it's intended, so to speak. Know the rules of the road. You know, it's an amazing Homo sapien quality. You can drive from here to wherever the roads go. And in this country anyway, we all stay on the right-hand side. Red means stop. This is the pass lane. Most people understand this, some do not. But we have these rules of traffic that enable us to function with a bunch of people we have no idea who they are. Does it make sense? Like, that's amazing. Sangha is a little more though. Sangha is, we have this intimate experience, this seeing of things from a deeper or higher perspective, and we look to find others with whom we can share this. Help guide us to deepen it, correct us if we get stuck in a little eddy here. And friends, please. Friends. Not just likes and cross posts and friends, actual friendships, actual connections over time with people that have this overview experience. I mean, perhaps one day, I don't know if I'm pulling the analogy too far, but imagine if people gathered at one of those massive Omni theaters. Have you ever been in one of those where it's like you're kind of sitting and it's like, whoa, and like the seats go kind of straight down and the screen goes from beyond your peripheral view in all directions, right? I can fantasize an experience where people gather in a mindful or clear way, an intentional way, and sit there and just watch the earth dangle below, right? And if people could do that and see that and actually kind of connect, oh yeah, that's right. The Hatfields and the McCoys really aren't that different, are they? Like, it's okay. We can work this out. We're all together in this. This would be, I would say, a religious experience. It would be a community experience, you see. What it would lack is practice. One needs not just moments of insight, but ways of practicing and making real. So these two things can happen at the same time. You can be in a deep, connected and communal moment as you have a direct, intimate experience. Master Dogen is one of the very important ancestors in the lineage. In the 13th century, he had his version of this, and I'd like to share it with you. It has to do with his journey to China and to seeing for himself the Dharma. He writes in the Shobogenzo at the end of chapter 12 called Kesa Kudoku, on the verse of the Kesa. During my stay in Sung, China, Dogen writes, when I was making efforts on the long platform. You're sitting on the long platform, by the way, that's you. Making efforts in the zendo, we might say today. I saw that my neighbor at the end of sitting would lift up his rock suit, his robe, and place it on his head. Then, holding hands together in gasho and veneration, he would recite a verse. This verse was, "Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, saving all sentient beings." At that time, Dogen says, there arose in me a feeling I have never before experienced. My body was overwhelmed with joy. Tears of gratitude secretly, because he's Japanese. Tears of joy, gratitude secretly fell and soaked the lapels of my collar. The reason was that when I had read the Angama Sutra previously, I had noticed sentences and words about humbly receiving the robe of the Buddha on top of the head, but I had not clarified the standards for this behavior. However, seeing it done now, before my very eyes, I was overjoyed. I thought to myself, it is a pity that when I was in my homeland, there was no master to teach this, and no good friend to recommend it. How could I not regret, how could I not deplore passing so much time in vain? Now that I am seeing it, hearing it, I can rejoice in past good conduct. If I had vainly stayed in my home country, how could I have sat next to this treasure of a practicing monk who has received the transmission of and who wears the very robe of the Buddha himself? This sadness, joy, was not one-sided. Rather, 1,000 myriad tears of gratitude ran down. So in this tale, this snapshot from centuries and cultures away, we see an expression of this communal intelligence holding and carrying and transmitting something that needs to be, and in this case was, experienced. And the experience of that is what is transformative. Now, as it turns out, Master Dogen successfully navigated his way back to Japan, set up shop, began teaching, ordained, taught the robe, taught the verse of the Kesa. And those of us who take refuge in a formal way in this temple participate in that exact same lineage transmission to this day. This is like our Dharma great, however many grandpas here talking. But it wasn't just a communal thing, it was his own intimate experience, both occurring. And so sometimes it can be a little odd. You find yourself having been burned by some organized religious mistake, and yet compelled to get connected. This is actually healthy on both counts. Dogen, too, felt the connection that he had in his home country was insufficient. So he, too, had to take the great adventure and voyage to find home, to find the spiritual community and friends, to find that overview effect, the Buddha view effect, the reality view. And so for many of us in this Zendo, we have joined in that same journey. We're not just watching a film of the earth. You actually are experiencing the direct thing yourself. But even that can be diminished, it can be lost, it needs to be reaffirmed and reconnected with. And so we gather and recite the verse daily here at the temple. Now, for some of us in the room and watching, you're about to begin a week of intensely focusing on sewing this robe, on, with your own hands, your own heart, your own soul and gumption, if you will, creating the Buddha's robe. Be warned, only a Buddha can do this. Be encouraged, you're included in that. But this business of sewing, this business of needle and thread, of mentorship and time spent and good friendships and some no small measure of frustration along the way and spots. This is integral. This is part of it. It's a precious part. I invite Reverend Kaishin, who is our sewing lead and coordinator, who really runs all the sewing, who will be deeply in charge, as he has been in the past. Again, this year, we're lucky to have his efforts to help guide the sewers. And I've asked him here to share some comments on the practice of sewing. Please, Reverend, if you would.
Good morning. I sewed my first Roxu in 2010 with a few of you here. And I had no idea what I was getting into in that practice. It seemed at that time that we had to sew this thing to do this other thing. And the actual act of the sewing, I was fortunate enough to be able to continue to participate in it for many, many, many years. And what I have come to encounter, and what I hope other people see and encounter much more quickly than I did, is that these are not two different things. The tradition is just full of comments and sentences and words about the Buddha's teaching and the robe not being two separate things. Teachers saying, to wear the robe and sit zazen, this is everything. And this morning we were talking about pickles, particularly from the perspective of there are some things in our life where we have to kind of soak in it for it to really take its impact, to really have its effect. And working with the robe, whether it's the actual time that you're putting stitches into it, or the folding, or the placing on the head and the chanting, this continual practice is a major gate into everything that the Buddha offers in terms of these gates of practice. There's a book that I reference sometimes too, and it's a compilation of different quotes and information and histories on the sewing, predominantly on the teachings of the robe, and not a whole lot has been said about that beyond what Dogen offered in a couple of vasicles, where he's talking about the nature of the robe itself. But for those of you who have gone through this, either you're partway through now or you've done it before, you have already had this intimate experience of encountering those teachings, whether you recognize it or not. Because in this seemingly, what could be, hopefully not, this seemingly mundane task of needle and thread, you are relentlessly encountering yourself. And for a lot of people who go through the process, that's not always a fun encounter. I would say somewhere in the region of less than half of the people who ever sow the rock suet our community can report just encountering it as a euphoric joy. And no matter what it is that comes up, that is you encountering yourself. Just like in Zazen, whatever comes up, this is you encountering yourself. What arises in liturgy, this is you encountering yourself. And we have all of these amazing tools and these unbelievable guides who are pointing our attention to the fact that that is what is unfolding. And the sewing of the robe is a very particular form of that. Firstly, the most important teaching about that I have received from my teachers is that there is only one robe. And that Shakyamuni's robe is sewn endlessly into Ananda's robe, into my Kashyap's robe, and all the way down the line, and that our robes are an extension of our teachers' robes. And so Sangha and lineage connects us in that very act. There is an embodied participation in that trusting reaching out to people who we recognize in some way have traction in this type of practice, have experience in what this is, or what we imagine it to be, will encounter that might not match up. And it presents itself in some very interesting ways. You can get very analogy-like, but the sewing of the robe is we take this fabric, and the first thing we do is destroy it. We cut it up. And even that solid fabric, that's not solid. That's just other pieces. And before it was this, it was a plant. And before, it's on and on and on. Just in this particular moment, this green earth and this universe showing up in a very particular way. And you might come to the sewing feeling destroyed, come to the practice feeling destroyed and cut apart. And then, we start marking things and we start stitching them. We find ways of putting it all together. And so we take two pieces and, 3/4 inch overlap. Start with the stitch. And strength and continuity emerges. And even as we do that, we encounter ourselves. Are my stitches going the right way? I get a knot, how do I feel? Having to pluck out the stitches. I think this is really good. I'm going to show it to Kaisen. You need to pull that out. That's backwards. But you pinned it. Yes, I pinned it backwards, and now you need to pull that out. So, at each moment, we continue to run into this life where we have expectations and goals and hopes, and it's this sewn together or woven together manifestation of the universe that we recognize as our own life. And we surround ourselves with people who are suffering very much the same way we are, and we enjoy it, or we hate it. Zenmyo's not here last year. Zenmyo was it? I don't think it was last year that he did Jakarta, but he was a very interesting model that he had this joyful effort around something he very happily and vocally said he absolutely hated. And so once a year, I invite him to be part of the sewing team, just to remember that moment. And so as we sew, we encounter all these dichotomies that when, again, we're zoomed in, we see those dichotomies, like Roshi was saying. Is it perfect? Is it flawed? Is it straight? Is it crooked? Is it two? Is it one? And you see all the flaws, and you have all the memories as you're sewing it. And I love this, like you chose, like looking at this right now, going back to it, because a lot of times when we go through that process and we come out the other end, and we, in the physical way, wear the Buddha's robe, it's like the zoom out. It becomes, I won't tell people, it's just gonna be this field of black on you. And all those little imperfections that you sewed into it become part of that just perfect field, what it chanted, this formless field of benefaction. It looks like it's got a very particular form. But even that's temporary. Your Raksu will be ash and dust. Hopefully not, on the side of a roundabout in Holland, Ohio, or forgotten in a hotel room somewhere. I mean, the robe has its life, as we do, beginnings, middles, and ends. But you will encounter all the aspects of you, how you want it to go. You will encounter this idea of, I am creating this great thing. Expectation. I will put every stitch. I will sew every one of these countless stitches into my own Raksu. And then we make sure you can't, because we're gonna do a couple for you. Or you might need help. And sometimes now we're encountering that. Can you receive help? What arises? Accepting help, having to do it over. One thing I got from Doan that has really helped me in guiding people is when we are sewing, we're not just sewing in front of the TV or whatever. We're in that chanting of internally or externally, one with Buddha, one with Dharma, one with Sangha, the three jewels of this practice, and the intentionality behind that sewn into every stitch. And after 14 years of sewing robes, I've never found a way to actually pull the intentionality, the karmic impact of that work out, even as I pull out stitches. So you get to do the do-over, you get double bonus karma points. So I look forward to working with this, with everyone, because it is an ongoing practice. You will cut a thread at some point and you will hand it in, and the teachers will do this magic with it and you will receive the Dharma name. And at some point you will realize that you have not finished sewing the robe. Okay, a particular form of needle and thread will have had its beginning and its middle and its end, and that experience of the sewing of the robe, which is right in the middle of the story that Roshi told of Dogen, which doesn't sound like they're doing needle and thread work at that time, but the work that we do as we wear the Tathagata's teachings, which actually doesn't matter if you've got a Rakusu or an Okesa, the wearing of the Tathagata's teachings is available to everyone. And as you practice that, you are sewing the robe. You're sewing the robe in the sewing room. You're sewing the robe as you put it on your head. You're sewing the robe as you put it in the bag to put aside. You're sewing the robe as you do the dishes, empty the cat litter box, call your spouse. This is a continuous, ceaseless practice that is uniquely yours and shared by all of us, by just being in existence in this precious human life.
So at the very beginning of the Sangha, a disciple came to the Buddha and said, we have a branding issue, sir. Folks want to know who we are and how to identify us, and they cannot. What should we do? And so the Buddha looked out and saw below the landscape of the rice fields. And he said, let us do that, disciple. Let us do that. Make our robe look like this patchwork rice field. And so from the very beginning of the Sangha, of the first ordained Sangha and lay Sangha, and the practice that began within the lifespan of the Buddha himself, to this temple and this place and us now, this robe persists. So may the Sangha flourish. May the robes be true. May it be so.
Number 7, Bodhisattva Practice, also found on page 8.
Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embrace possible.